The film begins in 1707, in the remote verdant province of Småland, Sweden. We see a young boy, barely old enough to walk, sitting in the middle of a vibrant garden. This is Carl, and to him every petal and leaf is a whisper from the divine. His father, Niels Linnaeus, was a Lutheran pastor and an avid amateur botanist. Niels didn't just grow plants, he curated them. He laid out his garden in a specific order, teaching Carl the names of flowers as if they were members of the family. By the age of 4, Carl was obsessed. If his father didn't know the name of a wildflower, the boy would grow restless. He began to gather weeds and transplant them into his own small patch of earth, creating a miniature kingdom of green. However, the world of the 18th century had a narrow path for the sons of pastors. Carl was sent to school to study for the clergy, but the Latin grammar and dry theology felt like a prison. He spent his days truant, wandering the woods, filling his pockets with moss and beetles. His teachers were despairing, labeling him unfit for higher learning. They suggested he be apprenticed as a cobbler or a tailor. But one doctor saw something different. Dr. Johann Rothman recognized that Carl's distraction was actually a profound surgical focus on the natural world. He introduced the boy to the works of Tournefort and the revolutionary idea that plants had sexual characteristics. It was the spark that would eventually set the scientific world ablaze. In 1732, the narrative shifts to a rugged, cinematic landscape, the Arctic wilderness of Lapland. Carl, now a young man with a thin purse and a massive ambition, set out alone on a 3,000-mile expedition. The visuals here are stark: towering mountains, endless tundra, and the midnight sun. Linnaeus traveled on horseback and on foot, enduring freezing rains and swarms of mosquitoes that blurred the horizon. He lived among the Sami people, learning their medicine and their deep connection to the land. It was during this isolation that the chaos of nature began to reveal its hidden structure to him. He saw that the current way of naming plants, long, rambling Latin descriptions that varied from country to country, was a barrier to truth. A plant might be called plantago foliis, ovato lanceolatis, pubescentibus, spica cylindrica, scapo tereti in one book, and something entirely different in another. It was a Tower of Babel for scientists. He returned to Uppsala not just with pressed flowers and sketches, but with a philosophy: God created, Linnaeus ordered. In 1735, while living in the Netherlands, Linnaeus published a slim volume that would change history, Systema Naturae. The cinematic core of this era is the sexual system. Linnaeus proposed that plants should be classified by their reproductive organs, stamens and pistils. In the buttoned-up world of the 1700s, this was scandalous. He used provocative language describing husbands and wives in nuptial beds. Some critics called his work loathsome harlotry. But the system worked. It was simple. It was universal. Then came his greatest stroke of genius, binomial nomenclature. Instead of a paragraph of Latin, every living thing would have two names: a genus and a species. Homo sapiens, Rosa canina, Canis lupus. With 2 words, Linnaeus provided a handle for every organism in the universe. He was the first to dare to place humans within the animal kingdom, classifying us alongside the apes, a move that was both scientifically bold and religiously controversial. As a professor at Uppsala University, Linnaeus became a titan. He transformed the university's botanical garden into a living encyclopedia, arranged according to his new system. He was a charismatic teacher, leading herbationes, botanical excursions, into the countryside. Hundreds of students followed him, carrying banners and blowing horns when a rare specimen was found. He called his most brilliant students his apostles. He sent them to the 4 corners of the earth, to the Americas, to South Africa, to Japan, and even on Captain Cook's first voyage. But there was a shadow to this brilliance. Linnaeus was a man of immense ego, sometimes referred to as the second Adam. He was obsessed with his own legacy and could be ruthlessly dismissive of those who questioned his system. He worked with a feverish, almost frantic pace, convinced that he was completing God's work by cataloguing the divine cabinet of curiosities. In his final years, the vibrant world Linnaeus had ordered began to fade. He suffered a series of strokes that robbed him of his memory. The man who had named the world could no longer remember the names of the flowers in his own garden. He would walk through the rows of plants he had planted, touching their leaves, weeping because the children he had baptized now felt like strangers. He died in 1778, but his presence never left the soil. The legacy of Carl Linnaeus is the very foundation of how we view our planet. Before Linnaeus, nature was a frightening, disorganized sprawl. After him, it was a library. Every time a scientist identifies a new species in the Amazon or a conservationist tracks an endangered orchid, they are using the language Linnaeus invented. He taught us that to name a thing is to begin to understand it. He gave us the tools to see the connections between a blade of grass and a towering sequoia. While modern DNA sequencing has refined his categories, the Linnaean system remains the bedrock of biology. He was the man who turned the wilderness into a map, proving that while we may be small in the face of nature, our ability to observe, categorize, and respect its order is what makes us truly human. The film ends on a quiet shot of a single flower, a Linnea borealis, twin flower, the delicate woodland bloom he loved most. It bears his name, a small, enduring signature on the canvas of the world.